Hi, my name is Noah, and I want to tell you a story about me and my little sister, Emmy. The thing is, we had to live on the street for a while. Do you want to know why? Then subscribe to the channel, and I will tell you how we came to live in a cardboard box. Our parents passed away 10 years ago. Since my sister and I had no one else, we were immediately sent to an orphanage. Of course, it was worse than at home there. No one really cared about us or loved us the way Mom and Dad had. However, over time, we got used to it and realized that all we had left in the world was each other. During that time, we went through several orphanages. One of them got closed. Then we grew too big to stay in the next one. Finally, we came to stay in the third one. We didn't like it from the onset. The children there were mean and unfriendly, and the teachers treated us like we were prisoners. There were even special rooms for punishment there. If one of the children misbehaved, they got locked in such a room for several days. Emmy and I suffered and couldn't wait to be transferred to another orphanage. However, one day I found out that I was going to be staying there for good. I would already be an adult in a year and would be kicked out of there, while my sister would have to stay. I couldn't believe that. Very soon, I would have to leave my only family member behind and wouldn't be able to take care of her. Something had to be done. That's when we came up with an escape plan. One day, I got locked in the punishment room for standing up for my sister and getting into a fight with some other kids. I spent 3 days sitting there and realized that we couldn't afford to wait any longer. So, when I was finally let out, my sister and I waited for the right moment and ran away. Finally, no one tormented us anymore, and no one could separate us now. We were free to do as we pleased. However, that joy passed very quickly when evening came and we realized we had no place to sleep at. We found a large cardboard box in one of the alleys and got into it. Emmy fell asleep quickly, but I was looking at the stars and wondering why people were so mean. No one wanted to help or support us. The following day, I left Emmy in our new cardboard house and went looking for a job. Naturally, it wasn't easy. Many people even refused to talk to me when they heard that I was a bum and had no documents. I'd almost lost hope when I finally got lucky. I got a paper route and was paid very little money at the end of the day. It was enough to buy food for my sister and me. However, when I got back into the alley, I suddenly found Emmy missing. I got scared and started calling for her, but she was nowhere to be seen. I looked for her all over the neighborhood. Finally, I saw a familiar silhouette in the public library window by accident. Emmy was sitting inside and playing computer games without a care in the world. I scolded her for doing something so stupid. After all, she had scared me to death. But she just said that she had grown bored of sitting in the box. It was warm in the library and no one had tried to throw her out. She could also read books and play games for free there. Of course, she was right. But I still demanded that she not run away again. I reminded Emmy that we were surrounded by evil people we could only expect terrible things from. Emmy smiled and said that I was wrong. The world was full of good people, and we would definitely meet them. That's how life on the street began. I took whatever job I could find, washed dishes, and cleaned in exchange for food. Sometimes I would get lucky and people would give me a couple of sandwiches, looking disgusted. But more often than that, I got deceived and sent away after finishing the work. Those days were especially hard, as Emmy and I would have to go to sleep hungry. One such day, I was taking out the trash from a restaurant when its owner simply slammed the door in my face. There was nothing I could do, so I trudged back to our alley, upset. But when I crawled into our box, I saw Emmy smiling. She handed me a huge burger, French fries, and a Coke. Where had it all come from? My sister told me that she had met some guy that day who had taken her to dinner and fed her, and he had even given her money to buy food for me. I got angry and began to scold Emmy. "Are you crazy? You can't trust strangers. It's dangerous." She replied that he had been a good man who had just helped her and left. But I still did not believe in the kindness of strangers and insisted that all people were mean. Emmy tried to argue with me, but I didn't want to listen to her. I was convinced that I was right. After all, I had to protect and take care of my sister. That's why I decided to find another way to make money. I remembered a teacher from one of the orphanages teaching us to do magic tricks. I had memorized a few of them. I found everything I needed to make props in the garage and started performing on the street. I only made a few cents in a couple hours. All of a sudden, everything went to hell. A pair of policemen came around the corner. They came up to me and asked to see my documents. I knew it wouldn't end well for me, but it was too late to run. The police officers found out that I was living on the street and told me to go with them. I begged them to let me go because my little sister was waiting for me, but they didn't listen. That's how I ended up at the station. I had to admit that I had run away from an orphanage. The officers made a call and confirmed that I was telling the truth. An hour after that, they sat me in a car and drove me back to the orphanage. I asked the police to let me go and told them that Emmy was still out there on the street, but they didn't listen to me once again. I was back where I had run away from. I got sent to the punishment room for escaping at once. I shouted for them to find my sister because it was already dark outside. I imagined how scared Emmy would feel all alone out there, but I could do nothing to help her. Finally, alone, I started to think about what to do next. I had to get out of there and find Emmy as soon as possible. To do that, I had to calm down and put up with the rules of the orphanage. A few days later, I was finally released from that room. I had to endure and pretend to be calm, even though I was actually horrified that Emmy had been left all alone on the street. I waited until everyone had fallen asleep and got out of the orphanage. I ran as fast as I could. There was nothing I wanted more than to find my sister in that box. However, when I got to the alley in the early morning, I felt cold inside. Emmy wasn't there. I got terrified. I ran through the streets and called her name. I looked into all of the alleys hoping to see her. I went to all of the places we'd been together, but she was nowhere to be found. That's when I remembered the diner where that stranger had bought food for Emmy. I rushed there. When I asked if they had seen a poorly dressed girl at the diner, they told me that she had just come by several times. The first time she was with some guy, then a girl had fed her, and the last time she had come with both of them. That had been a couple of days before. Emmy hadn't come there since. I came back to the box that had been our home for a while. I felt terrified that I had lost my sister forever. I had been gone for a week. She must have gotten into trouble. But I decided it wasn't time to despair yet. I started taking on what jobs I could find. But now, instead of buying food, I spent all of the money on missing posters of Emmy and hung them up all over the neighborhood. I hoped someone had seen her and would tell me where she was. But time went on and Emmy didn't show up. One evening, I was sitting in my box, shivering with cold. I had not eaten for several days and felt like I was about to faint from hunger and fatigue. I could hardly keep my eyes open and found it impossible to distinguish between reality and dreams. Suddenly, I saw someone stop in front of me. I looked up and at first I thought I was hallucinating. Emmy was standing in front of me. "Hey Noah, where have you been for so long?" she asked. Everything immediately turned bright and joyful. I threw myself at her and hugged her. Tears were streaming down my face. I couldn't believe she was okay. I looked Emmy up and down. She was well-dressed, clean, and her hair looked nice too. She told me that a married couple had taken her in and was going to adopt her. I felt uneasy again. I couldn't believe that anyone would do such a good deed. But Emmy took my hand and said that she would introduce me to them. She took me to a small but tidy house where Mr. and Mrs. Hell lived. They were the ones who had been feeding my sister. They turned out to be very friendly and invited me to dinner. At the table, they told us that they used to live on the street, just like us, and knew full well how hard it was. That's why when they saw a lonely, frightened girl, they decided to help her. They offered to let me stay warm with them. I felt exhausted and, of course, agreed to stay the night. For the first time in years, I felt what it was like to be at home. It all seemed like a magical dream. Was I really lying on a clean bed under a roof and not dreaming about it in a dirty box? I spent half the night lost in thought. I realized that my sister was finally going to be okay. But what about me? Mr. and Mrs. Hell, though kind-hearted, weren't really well off. they probably weren't able to take both of us in, especially since I was already an adult and had to take care of myself. Emmy was right. There were good people in the world, but I didn't want to abuse their kindness, so I made a decision. Early the next morning, I was already on a bus to a neighboring town. I wanted to get a job at a logging company. The work was going to be hard, but that didn't scare me, especially since I knew my sister was going to be okay now. She was still fast asleep, and I'd left a letter laying beside her. I'd written how much I loved her and that I would never leave her. But first, I had to escape poverty and meet some good people of my own. And when I found my feet, I would definitely come back for her. I could really use some words of support right now. Write in the comments, what do you think about all of this? After all, I'm sure you're good guys too.